Hello everybody, this is GM Jesse Kraai, and I played a game recently where I felt the theme of the angry piece came out quite nicely. Here at Chess Lecture we've had a number of lectures by myself and others talking about the angry bishop, which arises in cases like the French, where if the bishop is locked in for a while, if it comes out it can be very angry when it does come out. It's like it was kept down, it was spurned by the other people in its vicinity, and when it comes out to great effect. And so this of course can happen with any piece, and this game I thought was interesting because we had a case of the angry knight, and I sensed it. And what I want to do is, by developing this theme, help you to understand certain situations and how you can deal with them in a practical game. So it's not just an aesthetic consideration. So my opponent, this was the last round of the Reno tournament, Western States, which I won a couple weeks ago. And my opponent is the young Steven Zirk, who has played well in a number of events and beat Van Bailey in one of these Reno events. So this was the last round. Now, my opponent plays g6, which really can't be all that bad of a move. But the difficulty with this move is that white is going to be able to advance his pawns and really take advantage of this knight on c6 to try to misplace him. But of course it's just the beginning of the game, and g6 can't be all that bad of a move. e3, bishop g7, d4. Now when we look at white's position, I think it's fair to say that bishop c1 is, the piece that has the most problems. So that's why I don't really like my opponent's move here, cd. Much prefer the move d6. And the idea is that after d5, black can play knight a5, and it looks a little funny, but he actually has good chances for play with moves like e5 coming next. That's a way that many GMs have played when they're trying to play for a win with black. cd, as I said, opens up the bishop on c1, and I think white has a comfortable edge here. d6. Now, I could play probably bishop e2 here. I was a little concerned with e5. I don't think that's a really major concern. But after bishop e2, probably knight h6, coming to f5. And black is also fighting the whites a little bit better here too. I decided it'd be best to ask the knight directly what he wanted to do. He comes to e5. And so now, instead of having an awkward knight on c6 that we're playing against, that's essentially transferred now to this bishop on e5, who is awkwardly placed. And I played bishop d3. And right away, black's going to have to ask himself some questions about how he's going to deal with that bishop. If at some point he takes this knight, obviously he can double my pawns, but then he'll have very serious dark square weaknesses. He could also consider playing bishop g7 here, probably playable, but he's then, then the issue of the bishop will be transferred now to an advantage in time for white. White will be up significant tempi. It's not the end of the game, but white can castle, play bishop g5, queen d2, rook a e1 with a nice setup. So I kind of like black's next move. He plays knight f6 and says, more important than solving the awkwardness of my bishop on e5 is simply not falling behind in time. So I think knight f6 is okay. Castles. Castles. And now I played bishop g5. So this phase of the game is fairly easy for white to play. I'm going to play moves like bishop g5, queen d2, rook a e1. And black, it's really on black now to come up with a plan to avoid getting hurt. Now, black is a little bit worse here due to the bishop on e5, the better placement of the white pieces, and white's got a little bit of a space advantage too. But that doesn't mean that black's at all doomed here. Modern chess play has really shown that you can be a little bit worse but still be very resilient in your game. Now, I thought here that a plan like a6, bishop d7, aiming for b5 would be typical. And I gave a variation of that in the notes. But understandably, my opponent wants to be a little bit more active. And we're going to see, actually, if anything in this game, that my opponent is really going to try to be keeping the dynamic potential of his position open and not falling into a passive position, which is typical of a young player and also maybe gets him in trouble, because really here, black shouldn't have an expectation of overwhelming white in any kind of dynamic way. His position simply doesn't have that kind of potential in it right now. But an interesting plan. Bishop g4. So the first point is just a tactical one, is that if f3 he has queen b6 and b2 is a problem. But the second point, probably more important, is after queen d2, black is intending queen d7, which he plays, and now he has some ideas of maybe coming back with bishop f5 to trade the piece, which I think is a good idea. Now, I played f4. I wanted to ask black what he wants to do with the bishop on e5. And I felt intuitively that his best move would be to take my knight on c3. And say after queen c3, follow up with the plan of bishop f5. It's true, white's better here, rook a e1, and in particular, black is going to be passive here. But okay, you know, we're going to play moves like rook f8, the game goes on. So black decides not to give me that pleasant position where we're really playing for just two results. Either I'm going to win or it's a draw. And he says, I want to play actively. Bishop d4, king h1. Now let's think about this position. So now the bishop is loose on d4. And we're going to see that that's a continual problem for him when we start when the variations start happening, because the bishop really needs to be protected, and that's always a source for me to attack. Now, black has a couple ideas. First of all, let's talk about the tactical ones. He's saying that anytime I play like h3, he can take it. See? Because the bishop now is guarding g1. This is part of the dynamic play he's aiming for. What he's also saying is that my knight on c3 does not stand well, that it has a problem getting into the game. And that's more or less true here, that my knight, you know, at least at the moment, can't come in, and that's kind of what this bishop d4 move, which is loose, is banking on. Notice that the bishop on g4 is also a potential target if he doesn't get back to f5 fairly quickly. But this is all in exchange for the fact that his own pieces are loose. And notice I think when you're passive, you should be, or your position isn't as good as your opponent, you should be very